Your Royal Highness, Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, members of the IISS, thank you very much for attending this Global Strategic Review, which is addressing 9 to 11 September 2011, the new strategic landscape. When we decided to label this Global Strategic Review one that would look at a new strategic landscape, this was something that we did already at the very beginning of the calendar year, not impeccably anticipating the great change that began to take place in January and continued for several months throughout Middle East and North Africa, change that is affecting positions, attitudes, and the geopolitical situation in many continents around the world. And so this Global Strategic Review, like its predecessors, will look at issues of the moment, but will also look at things from a long-term point of view. And particularly, it will reflect the very broad-ranging thematic and regionally focused research program of the International Institute for Strategic Studies, directed from London, but involving also our researchers in offices in Washington, Manama, and Singapore, and many more that we include from their own countries and places of work. The Institute's research program is continuing to broaden and deepen, and I want to thank very much Director of Studies Adam Ward and other members of the directing staff, senior fellows and researchers for having compiled for us today and for the rest of the weekend such a stimulating program. Our speaker today, Amr Moussa, has worked in the world of international affairs all of his career, had a diplomatic career which included running the Egyptian embassy in New Delhi, appointments to the United Nations, and of course served a decade as Foreign Minister of Egypt, and exactly again a decade as Secretary General of the Arab League. I last saw Amr Moussa actually in January at the World Economic Forum, where the Davos leadership invited me to chair a meeting that included him and 3 or 4 other leaders. And in my hard talk mode in January, as the events in Tahrir Square were beginning to take shape but had not yet matured for any particular result, I asked Amr Moussa, Secretary General of the Arab League, former Foreign Minister of Egypt, what does Mubarak have to do? And he said he must take an initiative. And I said, I'm sure he has to take an initiative, but what really must he do? And then he did say that the President of Egypt had to listen to the voice of his people, which was being expressed in a way that perhaps he hadn't fully absorbed. And since then, it's been reported in the press that Amr Moussa had a variety of one-to-one conversations with the President, but I can vouch that early in January, he was seeing how events were turning and in fact left the World Economic Forum to return to Egypt and played his role in the evolving events, and is now a candidate for the presidency of what will become, one hopes and expects, the new Egypt. And against the background of more than 20 years observing as a diplomat the international relations of the Arab world and the domestic politics of the Arab world, he comes to us now with his own views, personal views, on what has brought us to this stage and what will bring the Arab world to a new era of political development. So Amr Moussa, I invite you to take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your very kind introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish to express my extreme pleasure to be invited to this meeting of your institute, which is an opportunity for me to meet the esteemed audience working in the international affairs and following the developments, the very serious developments that are taking place in several parts of the world, in particular in the Middle East and in the Arab world. In fact, the first point that comes to my mind addressing such an audience on the 9th of September, first thing that comes to my mind is the memory of this heinous crime committed on 9/11, 10 years back. A very serious crime, an act of terrorism, was committed, leading to a bloody decade of confrontation and wars, as well as to policies based on doubtful and unsubstantiated theories such as the clash of civilizations and the end of history. The criminal act of 9/11 left all of us, regardless of nationality, geography, religion, color, or creed, left us enraged, in shame, and in disbelief. Disbelief despite that it was live on air from the outset to the end. We have seen it all. Few years earlier, before that 9/11, there were celebrations around the world marking the end of the Cold War, the demise of the Soviet Union. We would also recall that in that period of time, in October 1991, the Madrid Conference for Peace was held, for peace in the Middle East, was held and produced a chain of direct negotiations as it highlighted the principle of land for peace. The world at large, and the Middle East in particular, was full of hope that a new era of justice and prosperity for all would emerge, and a new international order, a different order, would be established, and the world would be heading to a better future. Unfortunately, this did not happen. It continued to be business as usual. Double standard formed the basis for many policies and remained one of the preferred international practices. The clash of civilizations, with special reference to Islam, became a leading world stage line of policy. Major conflicts and issues such as the Arab-Israeli conflict were placed on the back burner of a train going nowhere. The developing nations, with a very few exceptions, remained far behind, especially in Africa. In other words, no change was visible, which led to further frustration and for sentiments of despair. Questions were raised about the direction of the world. Would this indeed be the end of history? In other words, is what we see is what we are going to get, and forever? Could anybody, any people accept that? This certainly created bitter feelings in many parts of the world, especially in the Middle East. Having said that, I would like to quickly say that the atmosphere of despair and frustration in the Middle East, that bitter feeling in the Arab world, could not and should not be connected only to international causes, or to the international intervention, as many love to say. In fact, the Arab people were enraged, accumulating anger and feelings of rejection, because of the policies pursued by the so-called elected leaders, elected time and again through fraud. The misrule, the dictatorial rule, the introduction of ruling Republican families, and their aspiration to perpetuate their dynasties, consolidate hegemonies, and strengthen their grip on power, in addition to gathering of enormous wealth, triggered the opposition, then the uprising, then the revolution of the people against them, calling for their change and succeeding in toppling them, as you see in Tunis and Egypt and now in Libya. And revolutions are in so many other places in our area. People went to the streets in an unprecedented move in the Arab world to topple those rulers and put an end to those regimes. They could not accept anymore, the people could not accept anymore to be robbed of their present and also of their future by such regimes, incited and humiliated by those unacceptable policies. Change was a must, and it was time for change. In fact, many world power expected and wanted change. Some of them went further to force that change within certain parameters. The Greater Middle East was one of those plans for change which meant inter alia to prepare the ground for the era post the demise of the dictators. In fact, the big powers enjoyed the full cooperation of many of those leaders and became good friends. However, those very leaders were fully rejected by their people. So the careful handling by some big powers for a change under their auspices coincided with a brave drive, separate drive, by the people in several Arab countries to take the matters in their hands and stand against their regimes. Revolution occurred and succeeded by the people and for the people, oblivious of any foreign plans or interests. Hence, what we are witnessing today bear no resemblance or relations to the plans put forward under whatever banner, including in particular the policy propagating a greater and broader Middle East. Let me tell you that instead of greater Middle East, you will have a different, new, more vigorous Arab world in the years to come. This will be good for a safer future for the Middle East, redrawn by its people, believing in their vital need to peace, to stability, and to achieve prosperity. This is an important element in building a better, more peaceful, more stable Middle East. Changes in Tunisia, in Egypt, in Yemen, in Libya, and in Syria were genuine. And the change will affect the whole region. Perhaps in different degrees, with different approaches, but all shall fall within the parameters of change, of modernization, of development, of moving on. I predict that in the next few years, you are going to see a Middle East based on democracy, on reform, and on serious and genuine economic and social development. I believe that you are going to see a Middle East respecting its constitution and its laws, with freedom of expression, with serious economic plans to lift the standard of living and to make our people satisfied. I always dreamt of putting into effect this beautiful phrase mentioned in the American Constitution, the pursuit of happiness. That is what we need in the Middle East. We have paid enough for our freedom, our development, and we deserve a different present and future, and this will be the case. I am very optimistic about the future of the Arab world, very optimistic about the future of Egypt in particular. Let me put before you three important elements. I wish to highlight them. The successful popular uprisings in the Arab countries reflected the desire of the people that their governments would follow engaging, forthcoming, and productive policies that will produce a better region which is peaceful and prosperous. The second point, that there will be a steady policy towards a new Arab paradigm of more coordination and cooperation and not conflict or pursuing policies that would lead to confrontation and bloodshed. The third point in this connection is that we are going to continue our efforts, striving for a fair peace in the Middle East. We shall continue to strive to put an end to the Arab-Israeli conflict. We shall continue to abide by the Arab Peace Initiative of 2002. We need peace, we need an honorable peace, a balanced peace, and that is the definition of peace. We hope that we shall succeed with the support of the international community, but we have to enter into a serious phase of working together in order to achieve something, some results, to succeed in making peace and not to succeed in making a process of peace that continues forever. A win-win situation, ladies and gentlemen, is the real solution. The essence of the Arab Initiative, the essence of the Arab policies, the essence of what the Arab League tried to do in the last 10 years in particular, was to produce a win-win situation. But a win-win in the right sense of the word. If one side wins something, the other side should win something, not to take a promise, but to win something. This should be the case, and if this would be the case, and all wise people on all sides contribute to that wisely, it would be easy for us to achieve peace in the Middle East. In order for us to succeed in creating a stable situation in our countries, we need a stable region. We need the people to be comfortable that yes, they are achieving progress, but so are their neighbors. That the region as a whole would be ready to help in trade, in joint ventures, in tourism, in connections. This is what we need. Therefore, dealing with the regional side would strengthen the path for democracy and reform and vice versa. We tried that in the Arab League, and the basic documents of change were adopted already in 2004 in Tunis. Famous document signed by all, calling for modernization, calling for change. We use the word change, the word modernization, the word reform. We talked about transparency, about democracy, about the right of women, about education, about cultural cooperation with different other civilizations. We were in the business of introducing new paradigm. So we are really justified and we're really happy, all of us, that the revolution, or the time of the revolution in the Arab world has come, and that it produced until now at least 2 successful major changes in the governments, Tunis and Egypt. The third is on the line, that is Libya, and I hope that all other people striving for their freedom, for a better life for themselves, will also succeed without being subjected to violence and bloody government actions. Now, let me turn to the situation in Egypt. The revolution of the 25th of January started as demonstrations by young people, but then everybody in Egypt, from the south, the north, east and west, traveled to Cairo. Buses were full, trains, cars, people came walking just to assemble in Al-Tahrir Square and declare that we do not want any more of the regime as it stood at that moment. So it was a popular revolution with all generations, all classes, all geographical locations participating. That's why it succeeded. That was the case in Tunis also. And as we see, in several other Arab countries, demonstrations are not concentrated in the capital or in the cities, but in villages, in remote areas, as well as in the capital and the other capitals of Arab countries. Egypt has to be rebuilt. The previous regime left Egypt in a very difficult situation. Left Egypt with 50% living around the poverty line, with 30% of illiteracy. The Egyptian society, its files in education, environment, cities, agriculture, power, you just name it, were all mishandled. Therefore, our task is to rebuild the country, I won't say from scratch, but in certain areas we have to build from scratch. And we can do it. Therefore, it is rebuilding Egypt. That is the mission for all of us Egyptians. This should be based on 3 major points of an agenda of 3 major items: democracy, reform, and development. On democracy, we are not going to fall into the trap of superficial democracy. That is the glass box and the cameraman in the corner and some people, some individual or individuals queuing to drop their voting papers. This is part. It is not democracy. What we are after is real democracy, deep democracy. A constitution that highlights the basic principles of human rights and fundamental freedoms, the equality of all Egyptians, our responsibility for the pursuit of prosperity and respect for basic rights of our citizens, the separation of authorities, the independence of judiciary, the freedom of expression. This is democracy, and that is what we are after, and that is what we are going to do. Reform, because of what I have told you, that many of our files have been mismanaged. So we need to reform our education, our system of education. We need to reform our healthcare plans. We need to reform the sector, the agricultural sector. We need to reform the industrial sector, tourism, environment. We need to do all that. Can we? Yes, we can. We have the people. We have the educated people who were a bit stepped in favor of the people that the regime had confidence in, trusted people rather than educated and experienced people. That's why it is important that at this stage of our life in Egypt, experienced people will have to take the matters in their hands and push Egypt forward as quickly as we can. In economic and social development, I and many others like me believe in the free economy. At the same time, with this poverty of 50% also, we will have to address this very important issue, and very quickly. I remember that at the beginning of this decade, beginning of the century, in the United Nations, we produced the famous document, the centennial document, and we pledged that we shall deal with poverty and reduce it by half by the year 2015. That's what the United Nations has pledged. I do not suggest that we pledge in the same way, but we have to take real actions on the ground in order to deal with this very serious flaw in our society, meaning poverty. Egypt is a rich country if well managed, and with the agreements about investments, joint ventures, soft loans, changing the administration, beating the bureaucracy, all those things are attainable, and we shall start as soon as we declare the Second Republic of Egypt. That's why we call for the acceleration of the work towards elections, writing the constitution, electing the president, and this should be done in the next very few months. If Egypt succeeds, as I hope it will, I trust it will, the whole region is going to enter into a different ambience. Working, changing, democracy will have its very strong proponent in a major country like Egypt. And in fact, from now, I'm calling on our diplomacy to be very vigorous in standing with the people against the violent military actions that are taken against them. We should not remain silent. It is our responsibility to make our voice heard, that the people want to live a better life. This is their right. The people want to feel that they participate in the rule of their country, and this, they are right. And that the people want a clean democratic system, and this should be done. They don't want to see their files, the files of their lives, played with, neglected, as it has been the case under the previous regime, and they are right. We know that, and it is our firm intention to be serious about rebuilding Egypt. We should do it. And the Middle East and the Arab world will be different, and the Middle East itself, not only the Arab world, but the Middle East around us, will also be different. I believe firmly that if this gathering, as you are sitting today, meet next year, you will see a different Middle East. If you meet 5 years from now, you will see another region very active, participating vigorously in the world politics, world economy, and part of the 21st century. That's our intention, that's our decision, our determination. We shall do it. Thank you very much.
Amr Moussa, thank you very much indeed. It's now time to have a conversation with the IISS membership. We've got about 20 minutes to do so. Earlier this week you were in Hard Talk, so you know about tough questions, but even more importantly, you have put yourself up as candidate for presidency of Egypt. So there will be many questions you will be asked during your campaign. Let's have a dress rehearsal now, perhaps, and I invite people to take the floor, give us their name, if I haven't been able to identify you, pose their question, and then we'll include as many people as possible. Sultan Al-Qasimi, who has already made 15 tweets from this session. Sultan, go ahead. The microphone is about to come to you.
Thank you, sir. A question actually from Twitter for yourself. My name is Sultan Al-Qasimi. I'm a journalist from the UAE. Well, the question is, how do you propose to solve the escalating security situation taking place in Egypt right now? Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that this question will be dealt with sooner rather than later. It shouldn't wait for the elections to deal with the security situation. In fact, there are two things that pose a lot of concern in the Egyptian society. That is the security situation and the economic situation, both of them. The security situation has become very serious. I understand that the government has embarked on a plan to rebuild the police force, but there must be not only a change in the formation of the police force, but informing the mind and the way the police force deals with the people. This was part of the reasons why people were angry. Police should be at the service of the people and their security, their feeling of being secure in their houses, in their streets, in their schools, in the hospitals, and so on. This is an immediate task of those who are in power today, and that should continue with the election of the new government, new parliament, formation of the new government, and the election of the new president. This is something very, very serious because it has to do with the security of our society. But at the same time, we have to deal with the economic difficulties that we have because part of the insecurity rests on this very bad economic situation that makes especially poor people, as I said, it is around 50% of our population, make them live in a very difficult circumstances, and therefore their security and causing a lot of tension in the country.
Jean-Louis Jacquemin from France.
Mr. President, I would like to ask you a question that relates your previous job as Secretary General of the League of Arab States and your potential new job as President of Egypt. And just to ask you whether you have any plans to develop the economic side of the League of Arab States, because one of the features, or one of the weaknesses of the League of Arab States compared to the European Union, compared to ASEAN, is the fact that the political aspects has always been far more, political and security aspects, always far more important than regional economic integration. And don't you think that with the Arab Spring, there is a real opportunity for regional economic integration that has been lagging in Middle East and North Africa?
Well, thank you very much, first of all, for calling me Mr. President. I think I'm very happy. You are right. I want to state that we started the practice of calling for summit meetings to consider economic issues and social issues only, with no political agenda. The second summit meeting of the Arab League was held in Sharm el-Sheikh a week before the 25th of January. First one was held in Kuwait. There are a lot of plans pertaining to building roads, railway system, open skies, maritime lines, a rich fund to help small and medium-sized industries. And this started to function, in fact, last year. Yes, indeed, the Arab League should play a more vigorous role in building economic complementarity and economic cooperation and social cooperation in the Arab world. But I want to tell you that there are several Arab specialized agencies that are working in that field, including the funds like the Development Fund in Kuwait, the other one in Saudi Arabia, the third one in Emirates, and Arab countries are contributing to the capital of those funds, and they started to work in a steady way. But indeed, we need to do more, and the Arab League needs to do more, and I trust that this will be the case in the next 10 years.
The gentleman, yes, if you could stand up and then a microphone will come to you. Just give us your name. I'm sorry, I haven't been able to recognize you by name. I should, I know.
Thank you very much. My name is Ahmed Al-Mansouri from Hoth, UAE. I have a question, Mr. President. Do you have any strategy for working with the social structure in Egypt, which is socially mostly predominant by religious groups?
Say it again, please.
The strategy to manage reach congruence between different social streams there in Egypt. Mainly, you have religious group at the social level. You have a country which was run by one party, and then you have now to deal future Egypt with multi-party. And secondly, do you have any strategy for regaining Egypt, its past leadership at the regional level? Do you have a strategy for the leadership, any regional interests that you would like to share with us? Thirdly, about the peace process, what initiatives you're going to take there? Provided that you have currently you have Egypt, the demonstration, whatever change happened by the youth, and to reestablish the bridge between the youth who have conducted this, comparing to because you are representing the old regime right now. I mean, not the regime, old parties. So bridging the gap to regain the trust. Do you have also a strategy for that? Thank you very much.
Thank you for your 4 questions. But I accept that since you called me Mr. President. So yes, about the multi-party system. Now Egypt is moving steadily towards this multi-party system. There are old parties that are quite strong. There are certain religious groups that are more organized and therefore more powerful. But in my opinion, in my assessment, I do not believe that the upcoming parliamentary elections will produce a majority in the party. I believe the parliamentary elections, will produce several groups of deputies. Perhaps one is larger than the other, and this would lead to coalition governments. My fear is that the Italian episode will be repeated in Egypt. That is, with coalition bringing together several small parties, 10, 9, 10, or so. It will be easy to change government every 2 to 3 or 4 months. I remember at that time when Italy had this phenomenon that we were told that Italy was doing better than Italy with a government. Italy without a government did better than Italy with a government. But I don't think that this will apply to Egypt. We need a government, at this stage in particular, that could lead the world, based on parliamentary system, towards economic and social reform, and the reform I am talking about. But I am, as we are talking about this point, I am in favor of a presidential system rather than a parliamentary system, because this would guarantee some stability at this stage that we need. Perhaps later on, after 8 years, when the third president takes office, the country can consider shifting to a parliamentary system when the landscape is ready, the political landscape is ready. I don't think it's ready now. But between a landscape that is not ready and a democratic process that would be postponed, I believe to go ahead with the elections and get into this experience, and then we learn as we go. I'm not in favor of postponing the democratic process at all. As for the leadership, I do not want to appear as saying that everything in the Middle East depends on Egypt. But I want to be far from saying the truth if I say so. The Egyptian role is needed. Egyptian leadership is needed. But Egypt has to strive for that and get ready for that, to resume that role. And not necessarily by claiming leadership and saying we should do this. No, but as first among equals. And we have to talk together and start to build a consensus needed for all of us to deal with the major problems we have. Problem of economic development, social development, education and so on, but also the political issues that we have. We have a lot of major problems, very difficult to solve, and it depends on us, our position. What do we need? Our position on the Arab-Israeli conflict and its resolution. Our position on the Palestinian question and its resolution. Our position on the other problems with Iran, with several other countries. We have to sit together and decide. This needs Egypt to be healthy, present, and vigorous. As it needs that everybody else will be in the same situation. So I hope that we shall move quickly towards a stable situation in all Arab countries in order for us to be able to achieve or to resume our discussion on those issues. You still have two questions, the peace process and the old generation. Well, on the peace process, in my humble opinion, and my opinion on this point is really humble, there is no peace process. So we need to do something else. We cannot spend all our time moving around one table and a camera. We want to sit and do the job and solve the problem. We are ready. I trust that all those learned people around those tables have read the Arab Initiative. Please read it again. What we are offering is an offer many of our friends say Israel should not refuse. So we shall continue to stick to the Arab Initiative. And if you ask me my opinion about the Palestinians going to the United Nations, I say yes, they are right. They should go to the United Nations because there is no other avenue open. And when you tell them don't go and then offer them nothing instead, we are very astonished. We are very sad that this thing happens. Just don't go to the UN without any other offer, just to please one side. It doesn't go that way. We have to follow a balanced approach. Yes, if you want them to do or not to do, offer them something that they can consider the seeds for a win-win situation. We want peace, we don't want confrontation, but this should be done in a fair way. As for the old generation, well, the young generation needs the old generation and its expertise And also the old generation need the young generation for the vigor they carry. And we need the whole people, as I said, as I explained, this is the revolution of all the Egyptian people, and all Egyptian people should participate regardless of age, of religion, or color, or whatever. All of us are responsible, and all of us have to move on and lead Egypt to the future we are aspiring to have.
Take a couple more questions of the 22 that I have on my list. Take comfort from the fact that Amr Moussa will be with us all weekend. So those of you who can't get a public question, you might profit even more from a private question.
But answering questions outside of this hall and over time, it has to be paid for.
That's up for negotiation. Like so much else.
Like a peace process.
Mark Fitzpatrick was next. And then prepare yourself for Badi al-Muddin. So, yeah, but Mark Fitzpatrick first.
Thank you. I'm the director of the Non-Proliferation and Disarmament Program at IISS, so I'm obliged to ask the question about nuclear weapons. You mentioned a problem with Iran just briefly in your last answer. Some of Iran's near neighbors have expressed grave alarm at Iran's march toward a nuclear weapons capability. Some of them have even suggested that they themselves might have to seek a similar option. Egypt's previous two presidents both had a very firm non-nuclear weapons stance. They pursued policies that rejected nuclear weapons. I'm wondering, in light of Iran's march and the other neighbor of Egypt that is presumed to have nuclear weapons, whether the U.S. president would maintain the same firm firm stance against nuclear weapons.
Well, who is the other?
Another country begins with I, yes.
I wonder why. You mentioned Iran. Why don't you mention Iran? Anyway, yes, indeed, the security of the Middle East and in the Middle East depends on the establishment of a zone free from weapons of mass destruction, including, in particular, nuclear weapons. I don't think, look, to have a stable Middle East, you need economic plans, you need solving the problems, and you need to agree on a regional security scheme. This regional security scheme cannot be achieved if we have problems, nuclear problems, active nuclear problems in the region. You mentioned Iran. Fine. We in the Arab League, members of the Arab League, we are all against any nuclear military program. But we are for the right of all members of the NPT to achieve or to work on peaceful programs for development in nuclear field, as long as it's under international supervision. But we cannot deal with the issue of Iran without dealing with the issue of the other, as you said. So why singling out this? Is there a good nuclear program, military program, and a bad nuclear military program? This is not serious. That is why it failed. That's why you have no support for such a policy vis-à-vis Iran in the Arab public opinion. Because the other, as you said, is free from any criticism. So we can get away with it, as if the only culprit is Iran, which is not the case. And by the way, we do not have any report until now that confirms that Iran has embarked on a serious nuclear military option. You know that as the director, there is no firm report coming from an agency, UN agency, that has the authority to say so. But we have reports today, firm reports about the nuclear program in the other. Okay. So if we want to be serious, we address the nuclear program, the nuclear issue, in Israel and in Iran. And if this doesn't happen, I predict that others will follow suit.
Maria?
Nothing will give me more more pleasure than to call you president, actually. I hope it will happen.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you also for being so optimistic. We all need a streak of optimism in that area.
Not so optimistic. I am optimistic. Not so optimistic is too much.
Well, I would hope to be so optimistic. Anyway, my question is, what I understood from what you're saying, that in the next 1 year or maybe 5 years, the region is going to look different. And I'm seriously hoping as a Lebanese that it will be free of wars, of course. However, I fail to see if it is the democratic regimes that will be in the area, knowing also how the population in that area feels towards Israel. I feel that peace is not going to happen, especially with Israeli government like it is today. I wonder if you can shed light on that, also on relations with Iran as well. Thank you.
Lebanon is a very important part or member of the Arab family of nations and of Middle Eastern family of nations. And I don't think peace and stability and prosperity could be achieved if Lebanon is not part of the future arrangements. And I must, President Sadat used to say, hands off Lebanon. Of course it is a saying, it's a good thing to say, but nobody heeded that. The time has come now to give another look to the situation in Lebanon and to help Lebanon move on. Recently I was working in Paris 2 months ago. I met some Lebanese friends. They, as usual, very warm in their feelings, and we hugged each other and said, okay, tell me, what is the situation in Lebanon? I said, okay, forget about the situation. What is the situation in Egypt? So we are all in the same phase of change. And Lebanon will not be the exception. It will be among the leading countries that will move on before many others.
And the last question from Emil Hokaya, please. And I apologize to the many others who caught my eye, but I'm going as much as I can in order of those who did, and many hands went up fast. Emil.
Yes, thank you. Your critics would say that when you were at your height of power, perhaps you will be again even more powerful in a few months, but just a few months ago you were Secretary General of the Arab League, and the bloodshed and the repression in Syria started. And the reaction of the Arab League was, well, non-existent, and you were still the boss at the time. Some people would say that this suggests a lack of either foresight or courage or so. Then I saw a couple of days ago that you actually denounced the repression in Syria. Many people will wonder, where is the real Amr Moussa? When does he take stance? When he's in power? When you were there, your reaction to the bloodshed in Syria was pretty non-convincing for a lot of people. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this question. That gives me the opportunity to explain. As you know, the Arab League stood firm against the Libyan bombardment of their civilian citizens. And for the first time, the organization of the Arab League applied sanctions to a country on the basis of its mistreatment of its citizens. It was not the Palestinian question or political issues, but the resolution, as I introduced it, was that, and it got unanimous support. Then the Council of Ministers met and introduced this resolution. Two Arab countries introduced a resolution asking the Security Council to impose a free zone, no-fly, to authorize the establishment of a no-fly zone, military aircraft over Libya. And this was voted 20-2. On Syria, I again raised the issue. Several neighbor countries said on record that this is a very delicate situation it is producing waves of displaced persons, A, B, that whatever happens in the streets of several Syrian cities will happen in many neighbors too. Those neighbors need time to consider the issue and consult among themselves. So despite the fact that the Arab League and the Secretary General raised the issue, the answer on the Libyan issue and the answer on the Syrian issue were different. In the final analysis, the body that produces that decision, that resolution, is not the Secretary General, it is the Council of Ministers. So in fact, your criticism should be addressed to the whole body of the Summit or the Council of Ministers. The Secretary General has done his duty. There was in my last days, but I insisted on both. Succeeded in one, and the other one was decided by consensus that let us postpone for some time. This is the real Amr Moussa, which I am trying to not that I am justifying. I was really angry, and unfortunately, I couldn't push the issue more than that because of even the logistics. Being a Secretary General and outgoing, you know the lame backstory and all those things. Now, any member can say, okay, let us postpone that for a week, we'll come back, because they know the Secretary General is leaving in 8 days or 10 days. That was the issue. So I did not, and that's why when I am on my own, I said what I said in closed rooms to the rest of the Arab ministers. I said I can't say it now because I'm not anymore an official in the Arab world, and I don't use the closed rooms to discuss and to convince. And all I have only the public opinion. That's why what I said publicly represents my views that have been expressed very clearly in the closed meetings of the Council of Ministers of the Arab League.
Moussa, thank you very much for your remarks at the opening of this global strategic review, for taking a number of questions. I've shown some courage, perhaps unwise courage, in even turning down the chairman of the trustees who is seeking the floor now. So I hope I've done as much as I can to involve as many people as possible. You are staying for most of the weekend. I hope you will allow yourself, for no fee at all, to submit yourself to more democratic questioning from the floor here and participants of the IISS. And it only remains for me to say, as I think is typical in these occasions, that you have been kind enough to sing for your supper. Perhaps it's time now for you to enjoy it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. In fact, I wanted to say that I'm so sorry that I don't have many voters here around the table. But I have 4 Egyptians. I'm sure of 3 of them. One I'm not sure of. I hope that he is convinced now so that I can